Welcome, credit union community. Here are your 3 topics for today. First up, we'll discuss core dissatisfaction and how you can address it. Next, we'll cover how a strong back-out plan ensures security and agility when FinTech partnerships fail. And finally, we'll highlight what to look for in a cybersecurity vendor to protect your credit union from cyber threats. Welcome to Grow Your Credit Union. This is the podcast where credit union leaders gather, learn, and grow. I am your host, Joshua Barkley, and with me is my co-host, the Talk of Texas, the DeFi Queen. I'm talking about Becky Reed. Becky, welcome.
Howdy, y'all.
All right, Becky, we are recording this episode in late September, so by the time this episode releases, this will be long in the past. But I am going to Phoenix. I just found out today that I will be attending the Jack Henry Connect event from October 7th to October 10th. Becky, you will be there, correct?
Yes, I'm going to be there with the bank social team. We're going to have lots of people there. We actually have one of our team members that is based in Scottsdale. So I think there'll be like 5 of us at the booth. So it should be fun.
So for those listening that will be attending the Jack Henry event, come say hello to Becky and I. And Becky, are you going to have a shindig with hors d'oeuvres? And I'm asking because, yes, I want to come eat some food for free.
No, what you really should be asking me is if I'm going to do the karaoke again. I did that at Nacuso and it was a really big hit. But no plans to do that right now. I guess I'll have to think of something fun, Josh.
Okay, Becky, no hors d'oeuvres. She doesn't have hors d'oeuvres, folks, but karaoke could be on the table. Let's start the show, Becky. I want to introduce our guest for today. I'm talking about the CIO of Kohler Credit Union, Matt Furman. Matt, welcome to Grow Your Credit Union.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate being here.
A Cornerstone survey reveals that over 60% of community banks and credit unions are dissatisfied with their core providers, citing poor third-party integration and weak execution of product enhancements as major issues. In an article by Elizabeth Hollis, she offers 2 solutions to the core challenge. 1, implement a core conversion, a process that, according to Cornerstone, typically takes 18 months to complete, or optimize your current core by reducing its role to a system of record and integrating specialized components to address gaps. Matt, this is an interesting one because the need for digital experiences is strong. So what I'm wondering is, how is your credit union preparing for the future? Are you planning to convert to a new core system, or are you planning to optimize the one that you currently have?
This is a great question, more so because in May of 23, we went to a new core platform. So we just completed a core conversion. So I'm going to lean with, we are much more leaning towards optimizing the one we have for that very reason. And really in doing so, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you meant the digital experience, in that I work with our core and try to really ride the rails of my digital banking vendor rather than working for integrations into the core. The first question I ask almost every vendor is if they work with my digital banking provider, and how can I ride the rails of that platform to integrate back into my core, but kind of take a shortcut in doing so.
Matt, I want to jump back into to what you said earlier, that you did just complete not too long ago a core conversion. The challenges that you faced, because I find the core issue, no pun intended, within credit unions is one of the biggest challenges in the entire industry. And what I mean by that is, Becky, you've mentioned many times that credit unions are kind of stuck or held hostage by core providers, and they're not able to provide the member with the digital experience that they expect because of these outdated legacy systems. So what I'm wondering, Matt, is what are some of the challenges that you faced during that core conversion that maybe aren't talked about enough? Maybe something that shocked you as a CIO where you're like, I did not think that that was going to be a thing.
You kind of said it, Josh. The thing that holds us back is the speed to work with our core. If I want to plug in a new vendor, I'm looking at a 9-month turnaround. right? I mean, the credit union industry can't operate in that kind of lag. By the time you select a product and get there and implement it, you could have burned a whole year on that process. And I was very surprised in this industry in general at just the pace at which that stuff takes place.
Becky, talk to me a little bit about the challenges you faced or your philosophy around, let's exclude Matt for a second and let's talk to people who are going through the decision of, do I optimize what I have right now, or do I take the gamble of taking the engine out of my car for 18 months to try to make this core conversion work? What's your take on those two different options?
Well, in my almost 30-year career in the credit union space, I have participated in or led half a dozen core conversions, and it is quite a painful process. I think, however, that we as an industry have gotten used to the fact that it is a painful process that takes 18 months. And with the technology we have today, does it really need to take 18 months? I mean, I think that we can do better. What frustrates me the most is there are credit unions out there, generally on the smaller end of the asset size spectrum, that are really unable to compete from a technology perspective because their core is just so awful. And when I say awful, it doesn't necessarily mean that the technology is awful. Sometimes it's the contract that's awful. And the time to implement, which is what he just stated earlier, is if you want to integrate with somebody, if you want to implement the latest and greatest technology and you have a 9-month time frame, I mean, really? Is that really what you want to do? I think, unfortunately, my answer to you, Josh, is right now, there needs to be a third option. There needs to be a core out there that is built on the latest technology that allows a credit union to be nimble and allows them to do what they need to do. Now, you and I have talked quite a bit, Josh, about the coming Web3 phenomenon, right? So we're in Web2 today, and we are moving into the ownership economy of Web3, or a person-centric type of technology environment. And the capabilities that are available in a Web3 environment are just not available in a Web2 environment. But once they start to catch on, everybody's going to want to use that. And your credit union needs to be prepared for that change. Most cores on the market today will not be able to handle that jump from Web 2. Matt's in there going, yes, 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 I love it.
Absolutely.
So you're not going to be able to do that. So you need to have a core that operates in an environment. I'm going to call it, and a lot of people aren't going to know what this means. Hopefully Matt does. Something like a headless core, right? Where you have a backend. We're kind of going back to the early days of databases where the GUI, or the graphic user interface, right? The GUI interface, that user experience, it can be different. So you can plug in a different user experience to the backend. And frankly, and this is for banks too, community banks need this as well, we really need a third option.
I can't agree with that more. Is there is no one or two, right? As to Becky's point, there has to be a better way. We just did our core conversion, right? We are on a modern core, and the challenges are not subsided, which is where I kind of led into. I was surprised about that when we wrapped this up, and I'm still fighting the same challenges that we were fighting in the previous core. There has to be a better way. There has to be a faster way to plug in and a faster way to move as the credit union industry in order to stay competitive. That 9-month turnaround is not sustainable in our business.
Becky, from a philosophical standpoint, we talk a lot about mergers and acquisitions. We talk about, dare I say, the death of credit unions and community institutions. Is it possible that 10, 20 years from now, when we do a postmortem, if the industry has in fact shrunk, could we look back and say that the limitations of our core providers had a lot to do with our inability to compete?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say, and I do mean this with pun intended, that it is a core problem in our industry. All of us, every institution is running on a core that is more than 10 years old. Now, I'm going to ask you, at your home, do you use any technology that is 10 years old? Do you?
Other than maybe no.
I mean, no, you don't.
No.
Even, the little spaceship you have in your hand, right, is probably not more than a couple of years old. And here we are running financial systems on databases and technology that in most cases is multiple decades old, sometimes almost 50 years old. They were not built, they were not even meant to be utilized in the way that we are using them today. And so there's a lot of chewing gum and Scotch tape that are holding these things together. And we talk about disruption, and our industry, community banking and credit unions, will die if we do not have access to better technology, and it starts with the core.
The pressure to build the right tech stack is real, but it comes with challenges. Credit unions can face long decision-making cycles, and despite all the due diligence, things do not always go as planned. Matt, when you enter into a FinTech partnership, how do you prepare for the possibility that things could go wrong? And do you have a backup plan in place?
Yeah, as I work with a lot of, or speak to a lot of what I would call early stage fintech vendors. It's actually what I seek, right? And when you speak to these companies that aren't as well established as maybe some others out there, you have to understand they are still in startup mode. They may only have a few customers. And I want to be one of those few customers. I want to be that first one to do something. I often say that if you're looking around and you're a credit union and you're looking regionally at your competition or across the street at the other financial as to what they're doing, you're looking in the wrong place. The industry is changing, and playing right off our last segment of is that your core, your limiter, your digital banking experience is your next limiter. And for a lot of community banks and credit unions, we've all been risk averse. We've been risk averse our entire lives, right? Is kind of that fast follower, or maybe even behind that, just always making those safe decisions, the well-established firms with several of references. And I'm going the other way on that. But to your question, Josh, you also need a backup plan. You need to understand that some of these vendors may not make it, right? They may fail, something may go down on their systems, and you have to have a backup plan. And for example, a recent vendor we plugged in is a text-based referral platform. So it's baked into our digital experience. You click it, it pulls up your contact list, and I can just fire texts out to people. And that's how we refer new members to our credit union. Well, the backup plan on that is very simple, right? Our digital banking experience is all ran by groups on the back end. Our members are in groups. We have groups set up, ready to go, that pull that functionality from our digital experience. So let's pretend something goes awry. Let's pretend that vendor would have something happen, go offline. I can move my members out of those groups in mere minutes, and that functionally disappears as if it's never been there before. And I do that with any of these fintechs that I talk to, any of these new vendors. The risks I take are going to be low member impact. If this vendor goes away tomorrow, how are my members impacted? And that's the question I start with when I speak to all of these different companies. We're looking at some other digital onboarding things and stuff like that. And I just have to keep in the back of my head that if John, new member, is being digitally onboarded today, but Susie joins tomorrow and doesn't get that same digital onboarding experience, Susie doesn't know the difference, right? Therefore, your backup plan is how quickly can you pull said functionality? How can you soften the blow of pulling this out? And you can deal with the vendor ramifications thereafter. But to me, it's all about member experience. It's all about member data. It's all about keeping our members safe. And every vendor I speak with, those are my first questions, right? Is how do I immediately pull this service should I need to? What data traverses through your actual systems? Or again, I'm going to go back to what I mentioned. Does that data stay within my digital banking vendor? Because I do have piles of due diligence on that vendor. And if they're just playing in their space, oftentimes the data is not traversing outside of that. So it's just really, again, having that plan and being able to quickly execute and have it documented. Because let's all be honest, we have the best plan today and forget it in 6 months. Have that plan, be ready to execute, have it documented, and pull it if you need to. And that's how I approach all these relationships.
Matt, I've never heard anybody in the credit union space say, there's a new technology, I want in quick. Usually it's the opposite. It's usually new technology.
Correct.
Call me again in like 5 years after you've signed like 700 credit unions, and then we'll have lunch, and then we'll have another year-long sales cycle, and then we'll get the deal done.
But therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem in the credit union industry is that we're not innovating fast enough, and we're going to be blown away by all the innovation on the FinTech apps on your phone today because they are moving that fast.
Becky, you know this better than me. A lot of people in the industry, they bite their nails at every single technology purchase and act like it's everything is make or break, right? What advice can you impart to listeners around the idea of a back-out plan, or the idea that, look, not every single decision is make or break. You need to move quicker.
I think one of the things that I discuss with credit unions when they're talking about this back-out plan, as you say, or what happens if something goes wrong, because the truth of the matter is things do go wrong, right? Things happen, and yes, you have to have it documented, but one of the things we do in credit union land all the time is we practice what happens when we get robbed. And when I say that, we actually practice it. We go through a reenactment process at the credit union, and we do it every single year, sometimes more often than that, because that's a real threat to the credit union. And it always has been. Any financial institution is a target for that. We hope that it never happens, but we have to be prepared for when it does. We rarely have those reenactments for systems failures or technology failures, and we should. So it shouldn't just be break glass, right, when something happens and pull out the instruction manual, right? It should be so ingrained in your team that when something happens, they should be able to enact the plan and start moving together towards the resolution of that plan. Just like, I mean, you go through 10 years of robbery training, and when it actually happens to you, you know what to do because you've memorized it. You know exactly what to do. You know where to go. And oftentimes when technology failures happen, we all sit around looking at each other going, where's the procedure for that? Well, guess what? The procedure is on the shared drive that just went down. I mean, that's something you don't think about. It's like, oh, let's just look it up. It's like, no, that server's down, or you have no access to your network, or whatever the case may be. It's like, oh, we didn't really think about that. So I think that in the credit union, with any kind of risk mitigation efforts, it should be practiced.
Matt, I have to assume that technology issues arise, I don't want to say frequently, I don't want to scare anybody, but you should expect it, right? I mean, this should be expected. It's not like you're going to expect everything to run 100% all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, look at CrowdStrike about a month ago. That was the last thing I expected on my Friday morning, is for half my environment to be offline. And many financials and large enterprises across the country weren't prepared for, world were not prepared for that situation. So you're spot on. And Becky's right on with, you have to practice your plans. You have to practice your procedures. You have to not only know where they are, but give them a cycle. Make sure you can actually perform what you've documented you plan to perform.
And you mentioned the CrowdStrike thing. I think I'd be remiss not to kind of double click on that really quickly. So if you could walk us through that, you woke up to the CrowdStrike incident, and if you could tell us a little bit about what happened and then kind of how you reacted to it to try to solve this.
I can walk you through it. It's like it happened yesterday. I mean, thankfully, I'm a very early riser. I get up about 5 a.m. every day, and First thing I do is sit down, kind of check on things, right? And I just noticed a lot of systems were not working as expected. Shortly after, that's all I had to see was the news, read CrowdStrike, and sure enough, we were a CrowdStrike shop. As are many, I will still say they're one of the best security vendors out there. However, that day was not my favorite. So it was just a matter of kudos to my team. Not too often I have to call them all at 5 a.m. and say, let's rock and roll, guys. We just kind of hit the ground. We deployed. We had people at every location. For anybody listening that knows the situation, you had to be in front of said machine to get it out of the CrowdStrike situation. So servers are easy. Those are virtualized, but desktops, we had to basically spread out, deploy. We opened our doors at 8 a.m. as if nothing happened, which I will still go down to say in my career, that was probably one of the best accomplishments. My job was really to keep the board updated, keep the CEO updated, keep the target on my back, and really keep my team supported. I consider myself an air traffic controller at times, right? Just kind of directing traffic. Here's what to do next. Here's our priorities. It was an event. It was one we'll read about for quite some time. But again, a very good example of not to stress, to just put your head down, block and tackle, get through it, and just execute.
Welcome to our new segment, Behind the Data, where we bring you insights and context into trends impacting the credit union space, brought to you by the Filene Research Institute. We've always wanted to provide our listeners with direct access to original data and cutting-edge research, and we're excited to finally bring this idea to life thanks to our partnership with Filene Research Institute. Filene conducts incubators attended by hundreds of credit unions, drafts leading research, and produces timely data reports. They're experts in spotting trends, identifying threats, and uncovering opportunities ahead of the rest of the credit union industry. And we're excited to partner with them for this brand new segment. Let's kick things off. On Tuesday, October 22nd, the CFPB issued its finalized personal financial data rights rule, also known as Section 1033, aka open banking. With compliance deadlines spanning from 2027 to 2030, the intention is to empower consumers to have more control over their financial data by requiring financial institutions to provide access to that data to other third-party providers. This will allow consumers to select which financial services providers they use and what they want to use those providers for. According to Filene Research Institute, initial calculations suggest that only about 11% of credit unions will be impacted by this rule. However, this is a strong however, those affected will be relatively large credit unions, encompassing nearly 80% of all credit union assets and over 75% of all credit union members. The reality is that a faster timeline for some financial institutions will create competitive pressure for all financial institutions, including smaller credit unions, to implement changes to facilitate consumer data sharing and third-party connections. This rule will likely create an even more competitive financial services marketplace and bring new technology and compliance requirements for financial institutions, fintechs, and the data intermediaries that connect them. There's also a real possibility of shifts in how credit union members relate to their credit unions. Most credit unions will need to rely on core technology providers and other partners to make these changes to stay competitive. Managing cybersecurity within a credit union is like navigating a minefield, and Matt just explained that. It's complex, ever-changing, and one wrong step can lead to disaster. Here's a pretty interesting stat. From September 1st, 2023 through May 1st, 2024, credit unions reported 892 cyber incidents according to the NCUA. Given this alarming trend, it's pretty crucial to understand how to effectively manage cybersecurity and, more importantly, what to look for in a vendor or partner to help safeguard your credit union. Matt, you have experience outsourcing cybersecurity. You have a cloud-first approach, but I want to know, what are the key factors that you consider when choosing a cybersecurity vendor?
Well, I really look at, obviously, this is going to go opposite to what I said in the previous segment, is I do want that well-established partner. I want that partner that can prove with results that are established in the market. We have a few vendors that do various services for us. And I just ensure that constant monitoring of all the sensors, constant looking at all the rules and all the logs and ingesting everything. One of the things I really want to understand from any cybersecurity vendor is, are they an alerter or are they an action, right? So I don't just want that phone call at 3:00 in the morning. I want a cybersecurity vendor that can actually do something about it. Because let's say I don't answer that phone. We can't have a business reliance on a human answering a phone. So I need a service that can provide something. But really, I'll take this a step further in that cybersecurity vendors are one thing. Vendor management is another. It's more so on the credit union industry. We have to understand what our vendors are doing for cybersecurity, because most of the NCUA events you probably just listed there, I'm going to guess, are probably
third party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So think of the move it transfer situation that happened quite some time ago, right? It was more so, did you understand all the technologies your vendors use? What does your vendor management service look like? And if you outsource that, are they asking the right questions? I tie that into cybersecurity because I want to know the systems and technologies my partners use, so that when I see that news story that says, hey, X, Y, or Z is vulnerable, do I know which partners to call? So I kind of take a different approach with cybersecurity, is have the right players and the right services. But credit unions need to step up vendor management. I feel too many check a box and they move on and they get the SOC 2 and the few documents and they move on with their lives, versus really analyzing what technologies their vendors use, which is our responsibility. We are the member data owners. We have to understand what our partners are doing with that, how they're storing it and securing it.
Cybersecurity, Becky, how are you choosing your vendor partnerships?
Okay, so everything that Matt said is 100% true, and he's right on with all of the things that a credit union needs to be concerned about. What I'm going to say is that we cannot continue that way. We can't. Every credit union has, on average, 100 vendors that they use. Credit unions are not builders, generally. We are going to either build or buy, and 99% of the time we buy from somebody else, a third-party vendor, which is what you guys just talked about. The existing Web 2 infrastructure is already compromised to the point where it really can't continue into the future safely much longer. And what that means is that new technology is going to need to be required in order to safeguard people at the end of the day. All of our data has been compromised so many times that none of us even care anymore when another data breach happens, right? And most of the time, data breaches are happening because of third-party vendors that are plugged into the software where the data got compromised. That's what happens. And because of phishing and all kinds of other things that are just super sophisticated. And now we have AI with deep fakes and all of this kind of stuff. How can you really, truly make sure that you're safe? Well, you can't. You can't. You can do all of the due diligence and check all the boxes. You can be SOC 2 compliant. You can have everything locked down. You can do all of those things. And I'm here to tell you that you are still not safe. You're not. And what that means is we have to move into this. I'm going to go on this. This is a whole Web3 thing. So I'm going to start harping on this. But there is a technology that is out there, and I'll call it emerging technology, but it's to the point now where it's not really emerging. We understand what distributed ledger technology is doing. And because of the decentralized nature of it, you as a human being, are the owner of your own data. So if you're a hacker, if you're a bad guy, it is much, much easier to try to get into a centralized database like a Google or a Facebook or an AT&T or a United Healthcare or whatever, all the other things, the Experian, the Equifax, whatever, these giant centralized databases that you can get into through a third-party vendor with a phishing attack that's using a contractor, right? This happens all the time. So now I'd rather much do that. I'm a bad guy. I'm going to do that. I'm going to spend all my resources doing that. But now in a Web3 paradigm, now Josh, I have to hack your phone. And Matt, I have to hack your phone. And that is not that exciting of a proposition. And so what we all are going to need to do is move into this new environment, and eventually consumers are going to demand it. Because all of us don't know any better. We don't know that there's another way out there to protect our information, but there is. And so what I'm going to say is that financial institutions need to start looking toward the future, and while continuing the safe practices they're utilizing today, that still is important, but start looking for the signs that the future has arrived so you can adopt it sooner rather than later.
The term fourth turning, I've heard that one used a lot, but it sounds like, just from a societal standpoint, whether that's technology, whether that's currency, the way we do banking, it sounds like we need to make this huge pivot, but we're kind of stuck because we're stuck in the old way. So we have kind of one foot in this new direction and one foot planted in the past of what we understand. Can we make that pivot fast enough given the limitations of the old guard, the old systems, the old way of doing things, the board members that may not understand new technology? That's what I'm concerned about is, okay, we can acknowledge that there's a fourth turning, but are you going to react to it quickly enough?
Well, the answer is some won't, and it will be to their demise. Because they won't. For whatever reason, there's 1,000 different reasons that you can say why some financial institutions will not make that leap. Another thing that I want to keep in mind is, I make this sound like it's some tidal wave that's all going to come crashing down on us. And if we don't swim towards the tidal wave, we're all going to drown. That isn't necessarily true. If you look at all the paradigm shifts historically, they didn't happen overnight. Now, we benefit from the results of that paradigm shift, but we didn't live through it to kind of see how long it really took. Let's think about the internet. That's probably the most recent one where it really completely changed everything that we do, but it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took decades for really all the changes to happen. And just think about when the iPhone came out, that was a product of the internet. But the iPhone didn't come out till after the World Wide Web had been around for, 30 years almost. And the internet really didn't even gain traction for a good 20. And so, yes, all of these things are going to happen. You don't need to have it in your strategic plan. Oh, I'm going to go to Web3 or, whatever the next paradigm shift is tomorrow. But you do need to educate yourself. You need to be aware of what is happening. And once the Web3 environment has the tools for people to use, it will be a natural progression because people will go, oh, this is easy. They won't even know what's going on behind the scenes. They'll just know that it's faster, it's more secure, it's less expensive. And that is when we will start seeing it. So credit unions just need to make sure that they're staying aware of and educating themselves about the technology of the future, which you can read a lot about it now.
That brings us to the end of the show. Matt, what are your final thoughts related to what we've talked about on today's show?
I'd say everything we talked about really focused on taking risks, being innovative, moving the credit union movement forward, right? Is we had a lot of conversations just about what's holding us back. I'd say don't let anything hold us back. Keep innovating, move forward, take those risks, have a backup plan, understand it, but keep driving forward. And that's the only way we're going to survive through everything we just talked about today.
And Matt, for listeners who really like what you're putting down and they're like, I'd like to get a hold of that guy, what is the best way for listeners to reach out to you?
I can be found on LinkedIn. If you just look up Matthew Fairman, Matthew, last name Fehrmann, you'll find me there. There's not too many of me roaming out there, so pretty easy to find. Feel free to connect, chat. Would love to talk all day long.
Becky, final thoughts?
Oh my gosh, this was a good one, Matt. We talked about some really fun stuff, and I can see you and I are like seeing eye to eye, like completely. So maybe we need to go connect at a conference and have a coffee or a cocktail or something at some point. But technology is something we will never stop talking about. And technology institutions are really what financial institutions are becoming. And we are basically the payment center for our members. That's what we do. The checking account is really a wallet now. It's a digital wallet. And for Gen Z, you say checking account, they don't even know what the heck that is. And so we have to continue moving forward, one foot in front of the other, continue to stay informed. There's no reason to be scared. And you don't need to be a futurist to understand what's coming in the future.
Becky, for the listeners that really want to get a hold of you, let them know how they can do so.
LinkedIn, baby.
I want to give a special thanks to Matt. As always, special thanks to my co-host, Becky Reed. And then I want to give a special thanks to you, our listeners, for continuing to support and listen to another episode of Grow Your Credit Union. Remember, if you dig the show, please follow us on your podcast player of choice and share this episode with someone who would benefit from listening. If you want to be a guest or would like to talk about sponsorship opportunities, head to growyourcreditunion.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Take care, and bye-bye. All right, Becky, we are recording this episode in late September, so by the time this episode releases, this will be long in the past, but I am going to Phoenix. I just found out today that I will be attending the Jack Henry Connect event from October 7th to October 10th. Becky, you will be there, correct? Let's do another take. Do one more, and then that's it. All right, Becky, we are recording this episode in late September, so by the time this episode releases, this will be long in the past. But I am going to Phoenix. I just found out today that I will be attending the Jack Henry Connect event from October 7th to October 10th. Becky, you will be there, correct?